Hi everyone, I'm Mike, this is the Sunday Art Show, and this week we're up to episode X of the Animal Alphabet Challenge. So, big thank you to the Unknown Lifeform, who once again came through with some really cool suggestions for different animals beginning with the letter X. And out of the different ones that were suggested, the only one that was available on Pixabay was the xenops, which is this little bird here. So what I did is I took the reference photo from Pixabay, I then mirrored it, and then I decided to make it fit a little more easily into, or to make the pose fit a little more easily into the landscape format paper I'm using. I rotated the reference image a little bit, and then as I was drawing it, I further rotated it in my mind, as it were, with the drawing. So, as is customary for the challenge, I'm starting with A4 mixed media paper. And the first part of the challenge is that for each of these animals, working my way from A to Z through the alphabet, I'm drawing with a Sharpie marker pen with no initial pencil drawing. So the idea here was to kind of not only challenge myself to draw animals I don't normally depict, but also to kind of push my drawing skills a little bit, because if you draw a box or a cylinder quickly with a Sharpie, then I can do that pretty quickly. And even if I make a mistake, there's only a couple of lines. But when it comes to drawing the more refined and complicated lines of an animal, obviously you've got to get your proportions right. So using the Sharpie, which is completely permanent and in general puts down a pretty bold mark, it's really teaching me to be efficient with my drawing. And also, if I do make a mistake, I'm kind of learning ways to, I can't cover them up, so I'm learning ways to incorporate them into the drawing. So it's been a really good little project, actually. So while I've been chatting away, you can see I've started to outline this little bird. Now the bill of the bird has got a little bit of an upward curvature to it, and I've caught the slightest hint of that, but not really enough to mimic the true curvature. But I'm going to leave that as it is, because I feel I've gone close enough. And in general, what I've been doing here is, as I've been working away, I've been looking at my reference, and I think to myself, okay, what's the mark I need to make? And then I would say I'm using, you can almost describe it as tentative confidence. So what I mean by that is I make the absolute minimum mark that I feel I can get away with, but when I put it down, I try and do it fairly quickly and smoothly. In terms of drawing the branch that I'm putting in at the moment, that's much more relaxing. I can just look at that and kind of make it up a little bit as well, just to fit in with the composition of the drawing itself. So having established the basis of the bird and the simplest of drawings of the branch, I can now go back around my initial drawing and refine things. So the eye in particular, with the Sharpie, I've got to get that right first go, so I'm careful about the shape, and I'm careful to leave a little highlight in the eye as well. Now this bird has quite complex plumage and patterning, and I'm not going to try and replicate that. So the other aspect of the challenge is the drawing part, should only take about 10 minutes or so. I'm not trying to do, huge masterpieces here. So what I try and do is capture the essence of the pattern and the feathers and the texture by using a selected range of marks depending on what I'm doing. So for example, on the top of the wing there, I just use some slightly curved lines. On the chest, I've just used some almost cloud edge type lines. And then obviously the Sharpie is really good for areas of deep shadow as well. So one of the things I've learned during this challenge is I think up to about episode R, I was just doing these black and white drawings. And then from episode Q onwards, I would do the drawing. And then, as I will do in this video, I add some colour with watercolour washes. And if you've used watercolour at all, then one of the challenges is often that you've got, relative to acrylic or oil, you've got quite a limited tonal range. In other words, it can be reasonably difficult to get very, very dark darks in watercolour. But of course with the Sharpie it's dead easy. You can pile on the ink as much as you want. So it's quite an easy way to create a higher contrast watercolour painting. And it's also just a novel technique, at least for me. I know line and wash has been around for a long time, of course, but it's not something I've explored to the extent that this challenge has made me do. So I've been learning tons of stuff with each episode, and I kind of feel it's improved my drawing, but it's also improved my watercolour painting. And I've kind of found things I love about the Sharpie drawings and things that I don't like quite so much as well. So yeah, it's been really good fun so far. So again, what I'm doing here, and I think this is a good technique for drawing in general, so as I was working on the bird, being quite careful because I need to get that right, having concentrated quite hard for those couple of minutes, now I can go to another part of the picture which can be more relaxing. So I can just very loosely apply some shading and some texture marks onto the tree, onto the branch. And I think that's a really good way to work in general, because we've all, although we may not think it, none of us can truly concentrate with total focus for for half an hour or something like that. What tends to happen is we are concentrating in general, but our mind drifts away and then comes back to the task in hand. And the longer you try to maintain concentration, I think the more that happens. So, as mentioned, I think a good way to paint is to alternate back and forth every couple of minutes, or to draw between areas of the painting or drawing that are critical and need high precision, but then go to an area which you can play around with a little bit more. So I'm just refining the outline of the head here and putting in like a little dark line along the top, which is actually nearer to purple in the actual photo, but nevertheless it was a reasonably dark tone, so I decided to put that in. And then I'm just adding a little more texture here and there to create some sense of depth within, and sort of variation within the plumage as well. But one of the key things I've learned with these Sharpie drawings is don't take it too far. So there's the finished drawing for this little xenops bird. And now, having taped my paper down onto a board, I'm coming in with just a simple background wash of Ultramarine Blue. And because the paint is running out on my brush as I move down the page, that gives me a slightly lighter sky as I work my way towards the bottom. And you can see I just went straight over the drawing. And what I'm doing now is just lifting off that paint. While I'm doing this immediately while it's still wet. And this mixed media paper, the stuff by Daler-Rowney at least, it's really good for this, for lifting off. You can just work away at it with the paper towel and it doesn't damage the surface. The Clairefontaine mixed media paper is not so robust. But when I was doing that with that little lift off, I accidentally lifted off a bit of the wash just behind the back of the bird's head. So I just swept my brush across again. And now coming in with a smaller synthetic round and a little bit of burnt umber, and then mixing in alizarin crimson. Again, I'm just kind of relaxing and having a bit of fun with the brush applied side on, a bit of dry brush. And I'm deliberately varying the colours of the branch. So I'm not copying the colours of the branch in the photo at all. I'm simply playing here and having some fun, experimenting with colour, lifting bits off with a scrunched up paper towel, and so on. Now, to add a little bit of depth to the composition, I thought I would just paint in with a light green and the same small round brush, just kind of a fairly spindly tree off in the distance a little bit. So there's no outline to this tree, so that's going to help push it back and behind the bird and the main branch. And the background ultramarine wash is mostly dry, but not entirely dry. So in some areas, that's going to cause a softening of the edges and a dispersal of the paint I put down at the moment. And in other areas, I'll get a much better defined line. But you can see I can just use the very tip of the brush here to add these lovely sort of spindly branches and just have some fun, really. And then the trick here is to try not to repeat the pattern too much. So that's why I've just added that branch, which started by going up and then going almost vertically down, just so that you get like a random element to something that just grows in nature. So one of the things I've been doing with all of these challenge paintings is I've been using very, very vibrant colours. So for example, when I painted a vulture, I might have used some purple, even though the vulture isn't really purple. When I painted a warthog, I might have used some orange, or I might have used cadmium yellow for a wildebeest. The colours aren't really that vibrant or dramatic, but that's part of what I'm doing for the challenge, is having some fun with colour. So with that in mind, I started with just pure cadmium yellow here. And I'm applying that reasonably carefully, but again, now as I move to the tail, I've added a little alizarin crimson, a little bit of burnt umber to have a little bit of a reddish brown. And I'm just applying that in different areas and just gradually building up colour fairly carefully, but trying to stay nice and free with each brush stroke, even though I'm working fairly quickly. And now I'm moving into the purples to add some shadow areas. It's kind of a browny purple, but it is nevertheless, you know, a purple. Again, not too present in the actual reference, but there are hints of purple. For example, in the foot, which is gripping the branch, there's a little bit of a hint of purple there. So I figure, okay, why not extend that? And if I add much more ultramarine blue to the mix, with a little bit of alizarin crimson, then I can get a nice deeper purple, just a little touch of water, so the paint isn't too dilute, for some deeper shadows. And I can use that same colour for a little bit of a cast shadow underneath each of the little toes on the foot and the leg, so that it really looks like the bird is sitting on the branch there. And keep going with that same colour as it runs out on the brush. Roll the brush along the surface of the paper for a bit of dry brush, a bit of a textured brush mark, just to create some random marks on the tree. Now just some little touches of almost, it's just a little bit of an off green, a little bit of a browny green actually. So looking closely at the reference, there were little touches of green in the plumage of the animal. And again, I'm definitely not copying exactly where those are. You know, I'm just placing them here and there on the bird and trying to do so at random. But now a little bit more of a brighter orangey brown to bring out a little bit of a pop in the plumage. And then I carry that through to the very underside of the branch. And I think, okay, I'll add a few wiggles here underneath the branch to maybe make it look like something's growing, but I didn't really like the way that looked. So I lifted that off with a paper towel, but in doing that, I kind of left this undesirable little sort of burnt umber reddish residue there, and I'll come back to that in a moment. But nevertheless, I continue with that colour. So you can see I'm trying to kind of hide this mistake here, trying to lift it off with the paper towel. And as you can see, it's still showing on the beautiful clean wash I had. It's still showing. So I come back in with my purple, create a random outline, some kind of growth on the underside of the tree, fill that in with the brown, and then kind of try and blend that a little more into the underside shadow by darkening with some neutral tint and some ultramarine blue. Go back to the bird where I realise I've left some very light areas which aren't particularly desirable. I'm just adding some brown there, lifting it off if it goes on too heavy. A few other darker details just to make some of the colours pop a bit more and make some of the shadows a little deeper. You can get really fine lines with this little round brush, so it's perfect for just, you know, little bits of texture here and there. And then what I thought I would do for the outline of the tree, it's a hard black outline, but I thought I would just add little pops of colour here and there along the length of the tree, just to break up that outline, and that's a nice little technique. And then when we peel off the paper, we can kind of get a view of the finished image. So there we go, episode X done. Only 2 more episodes to go, and this animal alphabet challenge will be complete. I'm looking forward to finishing it. Hope you enjoyed this little video. Please remember to like, comment and subscribe, and I hope to see you next Sunday for the next episode of the Sunday Art Show. Thanks very much for watching.